Good morning, afternoon, depending on where you're good thinking right now. Welcome to Good Thinking Live. This is the show the short, sweet show that gives you just a little bit of time to spend on improving how you think, because we're given so many lessons in what to think. So this is a little bit of time to devote to how to think. And what I'm about to tell you today, it may make you skeptical. You know, it's the kind of information that you hear about and you think, is that really true? But believe me, what I'm about to tell you will blow your mind. Now, what I just did was I framed this conversation because that's what we're doing today. We're going to talk about how to use good thinking to get over the framing effect being used on you, and also how to use good thinking to use the framing effect to make your case and to make better decisions. That's what we're going to talk about today, and it is pretty cool. So I wanted to frame it up by saying you may be skeptical. How you think about this may make you think, is this a conspiracy theory? But trust me on this one. That's a frame of what is to follow. So let me know who's here, where you're from, and let's get started. All right. Is anyone here from LinkedIn Learning? Oh, sorry, LinkedIn Learning. I've got LinkedIn Learning on my mind because we're stealing some of the lessons from my critical thinking course on LinkedIn Learning. So is anyone here from LinkedIn Learning, LinkedIn rather? Again, and is anyone here from YouTube? Because we stream live on LinkedIn and on YouTube at 9 a.m. on Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific time on the West Coast, and 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time for everywhere else. So welcome here. We've got Stephen. Oh, Stephen. Greetings from 100 miles downriver from where the mighty Columbia meets the vast Pacific. Love it. Yeah, if you can tell me where you're from in a really clever way, bonus points. You get some chickens. So today we're going to spend about 20, no more than 30 minutes on how to understand the power and effects of framing. And framing really is this cognitive heuristic or rule of thumb. Some people call it a bias because it's a trick that where people tend to reach conclusions based on the framework within which a situation is presented. So it has a lot to do with what comes before the presentation, and you'll hear things like anchoring effect or blemishing. So we're going to talk about how you spot it, so how you can prevent it from being used to manipulate you, and then how you can use it in an ethical way to make better arguments. Chi, you're here from LinkedIn, and let us know also where you're from, like where you're from in the world, because it's fun to see where everyone is tuning in, all the good thinkers from around the world. When making decisions, people will be influenced by different things, different descriptions of the same issue. So for example, when you turn on the news, you may turn on to, like in the US, maybe you'll turn into CNN, or maybe you'll tune into Al Jazeera, or maybe you'll turn into MSNBC, or maybe you'll turn into Fox News. When you make that decision to turn on that news, that creates a frame, an expectation for what's to follow. So there are a lot of things where we don't even see the frames that are created and that we create for how we filter through this information. We've got Gabby from Dubai. Nice to see you. I'm so glad you're here. All right. So the first step in making the decision, any kind of decision is framing the situation, framing the problem, framing the argument. And in my LinkedIn Learning course, Critical Thinking for Better Judgment and Decision Making, I introduce Elizabeth Loftus. She's a researcher. She's got an interesting story if you want to look her up. It's an interesting story, but she was very first one to debunk eyewitness testimony in jury trials. And it's a very good lesson to borrow from. And I'll tell you a little bit about Elizabeth Loftus. And then I'm going to tell you how you can use framing both to prevent and also to create better arguments. Pam from Crowley, Texas, welcome to Good Thinking. All right. How many of you think about framing when you make an argument. Like, let's say that you are trying to convince your husband or your wife or your kids or your partner, whatever, to do something. How many of you think, I'm just going to ask them to do it, versus how many of you think for 1 second, the optimal way to frame it? So just do it or frame it. Just do it or frame it. Let me know. And then we'll see if maybe later you find that one works better than the other. I mean, sometimes you're just like, could you just do it? But how many of you just take that extra second to see, could I frame this? Could I frame this ask? Could I frame this argument? Could I frame this case in a better way? Just do it or frame it. We're going to get into Elizabeth Loftus, and then I'm going to tell you one very specific thing that you can think about, just a really quick thing that you can think about. And then we'll get into kind of some other tips and tricks. That's it. It's going to be short, going to be sweet, and you're going to come out with some actionable tips that you can use to make better arguments and avoid being kind of swayed into believing things that may be questionable. And the reason for this, always tying back to critical thinking, is the reason for this is sometimes the frame is so good, so tasty for our brains that we fail to take the time to question the reliability, relevance, and validity of the information. So Stephen says, frame it. I think I often frame the request. She says she frames the request. Fantastic. Just that little bit of a second, I have to say that sometimes, in the moment, I just do it. And then I think, could I have done that better? Would there have been a better outcome? Would it have been a better decision if I had taken time to frame it? All right, so here we go. In 1974, Elizabeth Loftus did this mind-blowing experiment where she showed subjects a video of a car accident. And then she asked the subjects, how fast were they going when they, and all she did was substitute one little frame word. So she asked them, how fast were the cars going? She asked one group, how fast were the cars going when they contacted each other? And then she asked another group, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? And then she asked the third group, how fast were the cars going when they smashed each other? Here's your question for bonus chickens. Guess what subjects said in terms of the speed with which cars were going what was the fastest speed when she asked how fast were they going when they contacted each other, hit each other, or smashed each other? What did they say in terms of the speed that the cars were going? What was the fastest scenario? Contact, hit, or smashed? What was the fastest scenario? And bear in mind, this was significantly faster, faster speeds. Which one? For chickens. All right, let me know. Now, while you're thinking about that, I will reveal the answer because there's always like a 10-second delay in the live stream. So what I will say is that it was significant that the eyewitness testimony, same exact video, just one substitution of a framing word. Stephen says smashed. Ding, 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 ding. Significant. Pam says smash. Absolutely. So this one framing word. Now you're talking about eyewitness testimony. This is testimony that is used to determine whether the future of someone's life, when the situation was framed by just one different word, it was dramatic. Smashed had a dramatically increased reported speed. And there's all kinds of things like when, or when was the window smashed, or did you see a window smashed? Certain things like that, where you kind of lead people to believe that what they see is the truth, and what we see, or what we perceive, and as you know from Good Thinking and the Manifesto, what we perceive is never all that there is. So how questions are framed matters, and even in eyewitness testimony. So how can you make sure that how you frame things doesn't defy reason, at least too much? So number one, you decide whether you're going to use a positive or a negative frame. All right. So maybe you're going to buy meat and you see that it is 95% or 90% rather, let's say, fat-free. Is that a positive or is that a negative frame? 90% fat-free versus it's 10% fat. 10% fat. You're going to have 10% fat in this meat. It's 90% fat-free. Is 90% fat-free a positive or negative frame? Chickens. All right. And so, for example, 90% fat-free is a positive frame. But how do you know whether you should you always just use a positive frame? Is it just better to always be positive? What do you think? Is it better to always present a positive frame? Is that the power of positive thinking? No, it's not always better to present a positive frame. As a matter of fact, because of loss aversion, like because we tend to behave in a way to avoid a loss more than we will to gain a positive outcome, sometimes a positive frame is better and sometimes it isn't. But in general, anytime that you can think about presenting something in a way that people avoid a loss, it will tend overall to be more effective in moving people to behave a certain way. So Pam says positive. She says 90% fat-free is positive. Steven says 90% positive, 100% participation. And that is absolutely right. So how do you know whether you should use a positive or negative frame? Well, if you want someone to do something, use a positive frame. Like vote for Pedro because he's awesome and will make all of your wildest dreams come true. That's a Napoleon Dynamite reference. I love that movie. All right. So that might be, or buy from Amazon because you won't have to risk going out during a pandemic. Buy from Amazon. You don't have to risk going out to the stores. You can just have it delivered. No, they have COVID protocols, no problem. That is a positive frame. So if you want someone to do something, vote for this candidate because they will make all of your wildest dreams come true. If you don't want someone to do something, use a negative frame. So don't buy from Amazon because even though that'll be great during COVID, times of COVID, when the pandemic is over and the quarantine is over, these local stores won't be there anymore. That is when you want to use a negative frame. And it's pretty easy. You see it all the time in elections. You see it in things that are presented to us in the news. If you don't want someone to do something, use a negative frame. Don't buy from that company. They won't get you the product on time and their products are clunky and you don't buy from our company. We will do this, this, and this. So depending on what you want, you can use a positive or negative frame. Number 2, decide whether to frame your argument as a loss or a gain. Losses and gains are not exactly the same as positive or negative. All right. Who can figure out the difference? Sometimes they kind of like, is that a positive or is that a gain? Is that a negative or is that a loss? They're related, but they can be different. If you take a vaccination that has a 90% chance of effectiveness, that's a positive frame. In a 10% chance of failure, that's a negative frame. Probably you'd be more willing to have a surgery that has a 95% success rate than you would to have a surgery that has a 10% fatality rate, or failure rate. But what about this? Would you take this coin toss gamble? Tails, which one would you take? Tails, you lose $100, or heads, you win 150. Which would you take? Tails, would you take this? Tails, you lose $100, or heads, you gain or win 150. Which one would you take? You have a choice. Would you take you could lose $100 or you could gain $150? Most people would answer that they would not take this because this heads, tails, this coin toss, because it hurts more to lose $100 than it does to gain $150. So one coin toss, Tails, oops. Heads, yay. Would you take it? Would you take the coin toss? Most people would not, because we will move to avoid a loss more than we will move to a gain. Psychologically, this doesn't really make sense. This totally makes sense, but rationally, not so much, because you have a 50% chance of making $150 and a 50% chance of losing $100. So rationally, no. Psychologically, yes. Because of this loss aversion, people will move to avoid a loss. So here's how to know whether to use a gain or a loss frame in your arguments. All right. If the outcome of the message is clear, gain framed arguments can be more persuasive. For example, you'll be safe from COVID if you stay home and wear a mask when you must go out. So if you'll be safe from COVID if you just stay home and anytime you go out, you wear a mask. Now, the problem with that is it's not clear. We have ambiguity around this whole thing. There's a lot of uncertainty. So this argument is not as good an argument because we've got a lot of uncertainty. So this will be your guide. If you've got a lot of uncertainty in something, a loss frame is a better argument to make. For example, you'll get COVID if you go out without a mask. That is a better frame in an uncertain situation. Now, of course, you can pick it apart and say, well, with COVID, there's this and that. These are just rules of thumb to help you know whether to make to highlight a loss frame or a gain frame. All right. How many of you would be more convinced that if you go out without a mask, you're going to catch COVID, or if you stay home, you're not going to catch COVID? Depends on what you know, how much uncertainty is in the mix. All right. Number 3, match the emotional frame to your objective. So think back to the eyewitness testimony experiment with the different frames: contact, hit, and smashed. So which thing do you think is more highly emotional? Contact, hit, or smashed? Which is more right in the limbic system, more emotional? Contact, hit, or smashed? Smashed, obviously. So when you use emotional frames to enhance negative or positive framing, that can have a compounding effect. So it's not like, let's say that if you don't invest in this new technology, you're going to have some disruption. We've got to update our, if we don't update to the newest operating system on our iPhone, we're going to have some trouble with some of our apps. If you don't upgrade to the new operating system on your iPhone, you might get hacked. If you don't upgrade to the new operating system on your iPhone, it will be devastating. The hacks are outrageous. So just how you heighten the emotion to move people to do something is something to think about as well. And be on the lookout for other people using these frames on you, because these frames are great for you to be using, but you also want to be as a good thinker, you want to be careful about these frames being used on you. And this has all kinds of implications about things that we believe or decisions that we make on evidence. Always go back to the reliability, relevance, and validity of evidence, because good thinking, critical thinking. All right. Number 4, don't automatically accept the initial frame. If someone presents something to you, don't automatically accept the initial frame, whether it was formulated by you or someone else. Like if you're leaning toward creating a frame, make sure that you are not just defaulting to confirmation bias, using evidence that just confirm what you want to believe and disconfirm, and kind of ignoring evidence that does not. So make sure that your frames are sturdy as well. And look for distortions caused by frames. Like, does that frame tell the whole story, or does it create a distortion, like a Salvador Dali frame, those kind of weird, mushy frames? Think hard about your decision process and about how you frame the problem. At points throughout the process, particularly near the end of your decision, ask yourself how thinking might change if framing changed. And this is a really good one. So in the very beginning, I said, what you're about to hear may make you feel skeptical, but that's how a lot of people felt about conspiracy theories that have proven to be true in the past. You know, a lot of people didn't believe that X and Y and Z happened, and later they learned that it did. So what I'm about to tell you might make you feel the same way, but don't be fooled, because what I'm about to tell you is the truth. Now, what I've done is I've done something called blemishing. And blemishing is a very powerful tool because I've said, you may feel this way, or, you know, and then I think, well, I do feel this way. I don't believe what she's going to tell me. Well, you may not believe what I'm about to tell you. Now I'm like, okay, well, that's true. I don't believe what she's going to tell me. A lot of people have felt the same way in the past, and they too were fooled. Don't be like them. That is a frame, a perfect frame when you want someone to believe a conspiracy theory. It's like, you know, it's like crack to a conspiracy theorist's, it's a crack in the conspiracy theorist's arsenal to try to convince you to believe a conspiracy theory. You know, some theories that seem crazy have proven to be true. You may think that this isn't one of them, but it is. This is a really tricky thing. Blemishing is a really tricky thing. Beware of blemishing being used on you, but also when you are making an argument, don't neglect blemishing. So it works like this. Blemishing works like this. Let's say that you are saying to your partner or your housemate or your apartment mate, you know, you never clean up anything. Can you clean up around here? You never clean up anything. Well, all your partner would have to say is, I dusted yesterday, or I emptied the dishwasher yesterday, and that pokes a hole in your argument. So you're better to blemish by saying, listen, I know you emptied the dishwasher yesterday, and that's awesome. But, you know, that doesn't make for 50%. Like, I need you know, can you help by doing this, this, and this? You acknowledge that there is a hole in your argument. You acknowledge that before you make the argument. And that's what that conspiracy theory trick is. I know that you will think that this is not true. You may even feel skeptical, but that is a form of blemishing. You acknowledge a flaw in your argument before you make the argument. That tends to make the argument go down a little clearer. All right. Anyone else on blemishing? Have you guys used blemishing? Do you think about blemishing? How can you use blemishing to make a better argument? All right. And the final thing, when others make recommended decisions, examine the way they frame the problem. Challenge them and challenge your mind with different frames. So, for example, when you see videos that, and you see something on Twitter, for example, and you see, let's say it's a video on Twitter, and you see someone writing in what they write in before the post, or you see a post on LinkedIn, or you see a YouTube video, or you see something in the news, and they present the frame. They tell you kind of, without telling you what to think, they give you a hint of how to fit this information into like how to fit it in your brain. They put a little frame in there. Realize that there could be a piece of a puzzle that fits the puzzle, that actually is cut out to fit the puzzle, but it doesn't complete the story. So question the frame. If it feels like it tells a really good story, if it just makes sense, or you want to believe it because it's just lovely and it makes you happy or makes you angry, if it affects you emotionally, like if you already feel a heightened emotion with the frame before the information comes in, you feel receptive to believing it before the information comes in, that is when you know you've been framed up and you want to question the frame. You could also use disconfirming techniques where you think, okay, that framed it up and they provided evidence and they provided a good story. I think still, even though I know that frame is kind of manipulative, this information seems right. That's when you go to find something that disconfirms your tendency to believe that. All right, that's it. Framing. Let me know before we finish today. Let me know, one of the most powerful forms of framing is anchoring. And would you be interested in playing with some anchoring, finding out how to use anchoring in negotiations, how to kind of combat anchoring being used against you in negotiations and decision-making, and how to use good thinking techniques to play with anchoring as a form of framing. Let me know if you want that. If you are seeing this after the fact, you're not watching this live, you either slept in if you're on the West Coast, or you didn't catch it live, didn't catch Good Thinking Live, feel free to respond at any time and I will get back to you with any comment. But let me know, would you be interested in anchoring, or you feel like, we've got anchoring down? A lot of people think, oh, we've got anchoring down. I know what that means. But there may be some things that could let you know some techniques of using anchoring that you hadn't considered before. So be sure that if you are not subscribed on YouTube, my YouTube channel, Becky Saltzman, just go on, smash that subscribe and smash that bell, and you will get notifications when we go live, which is most Mondays, 9 a.m. West Coast time in the US, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Also, you can catch it right here on LinkedIn Live. Pam says, I'd love to learn about anchoring. Excellent, because it's kind of fun. And it is so it's like a brain trick that we don't even realize is there. So I'll give you some fun. Well, maybe I'll do that next week. This will be a twofer. All right. Fantastic. I'm so glad you're here. So glad you joined. Hope to see you every week, Monday, most Mondays, and have a good week.